In the summer of 1939, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, Commander-in-Chief of the German Navy, faced the frustrating prospect of going to war with the British and French navies. Raeder had only 6 large ships, 2 modern battleships, 3 so-called pocket battleships, and 1 new heavy cruiser. To meet its worldwide commitments, the Royal Navy alone had 15 battleships and battlecruisers, 7 aircraft carriers, and 65 cruisers. Unable to confront the Allies directly or protect German merchant shipping, the Kriegsmarine's primary role would be to attack Britain's seaborne commerce with its submarines and surface ships. In this episode of Battle Stars, we ride with both the Hounds and the Fox, as the Royal Navy pursues and finally brings the German commerce raider, Admiral Graf Spee, to battle. In late August, Deutschland and Admiral Graf Spee, 2 of the pocket battleships, slipped undetected into the open ocean to prevent them from being bottled up in the Baltic Sea when the war started. Even when Great Britain and France went to war with Germany on September 3rd, the raiders remained at large without orders. Hitler still hoped to negotiate rather than fight. Finally, on September 26th, German naval headquarters ordered both ships to commence commerce raiding. Graf Spee, operating in the South Atlantic under the command of Captain Hans Langsdorff, struck first and more often, and soon the Royal Navy's icy gaze turned to her. Langsdorff was given a thankless task. Sinking merchant ships while both observing prize rules and remaining mostly untraceable was impossible. On September 30th, the master of Graf Spee's first victim, British steamship Clement, taken off the coast of Brazil, ignored his instructions not to transmit and sent the emergency signal for Raeder. "The news was electrifying," said Winston Churchill, who was First Lord of the Admiralty, because at the time the Royal Navy had no idea where the ship was operating. The British and French navies immediately formed 9 hunting groups in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans to find and destroy the raiders. For more than 2 months, while Graf Spee roamed waters from Brazil to Mozambique, the Royal Navy kept 24 major warships at sea, widely dispersed and searching their German quarry. Graf Spee took 4 vessels during October, but only 1 in November. On December 2nd, Graf Spee sank the British cargo liner Doric Star off Southwest Africa. The vessel's master not only signaled that a raider was attacking his ship, but he also specified the ship was either Graf Spee or Deutschland. Langsdorff sank another British freighter the next day, refueled from tanker Altmark on December 6th, and on December 7th sank another freighter, raising his total to 9 ships in 10 weeks. Having so far avoided trouble but unsatisfied with his work, Langsdorff decided to strike the target-rich shipping lanes of the River Plate estuary off the coast of Uruguay.
The winter of 1939 and 40 was described by amateur statesmen and strategists as the period of the phony war. Crew ships were sunk in the Battle of the Atlantic, and men died in this phony war, but there were no land battles.
In light cruiser Ajax, Commodore Henry Harwood had command of Force G, one of the hunting groups. Harwood knew exactly how he would fight a pocket battleship if he found one. Mulling transmissions from Doric Star, he correctly judged no raider worth his salt could easily ignore the River Plate, and by dawn on December 12th had concentrated his 3 available ships 150 miles east of the estuary. His largest unit was the heavy cruiser Exeter, with a main battery of only 6 8-inch guns. Achilles, a light cruiser in New Zealand's Navy, completed the group. The light cruisers were modern Leander-class ships. Each mounted 8 6-inch guns and 8 21-inch torpedo tubes. Langsdorff did not disappoint. As if on cue, the next morning smoke appeared on the horizon. Sending Exeter ahead to investigate, Captain Frederick Bell radioed,
"I think it is a pocket battleship."
Harwood increased speed and ordered the battle flags raised. Under his tactical plan, Exeter would operate as one unit, while the light cruisers worked as another, ideally splitting the Germans' aim, and preventing him from concentrating his main battery of 6 11-inch guns on a single ship. On board Graf Spee, Langsdorff had already spotted Harwood's group. Believing the ships were a light cruiser and 2 destroyers escorting a convoy, Langsdorff went to battle stations and increased speed. By the time he had accurately identified his opponents, the captain, whose duty was to avoid an uneven fight with the British, now realized 3 enemy cruisers, all faster than his own ship, were bringing him to battle. Langsdorff still might have tried to flee, fighting a retiring action, but instead went to full speed. At 0617 hours, he opened fire on Exeter with his main battery and on Ajax with his secondary 5.9-inch guns. Captain Bell opened fire 3 minutes later. Both light cruisers were firing by 0624. German gunnery proved disturbingly accurate from the start. The third of 3 high-explosive 11-inch rounds to strike Exeter in short succession knocked out B turret, destroyed communications, and sent a torrent of shrapnel into the bridge, killing nearly everyone and sending the ship momentarily out of control. To take the pressure off Exeter, Harwood closed the range. Captain Langsdorff, who had received the first of 2 splinter wounds when an 8-inch shell struck the open bridge, might have sunk Exeter. But wary of a torpedo attack, by 0630, he had shifted fire to the troublesome light cruisers, allowing the heavy cruiser a desperately needed respite. 6 minutes later, when the light cruisers showed no signs of letting go and peppered his ships with 6-inch fire, Langsdorff made smoke and turned west. On board Exeter, 11-inch hits had already knocked out her 2 forward turrets and started a huge fire amidships. The ship was listing and down by the bow, but still making 18 knots. Captain Bell, having survived the carnage on the bridge, re-engaged at 0700, conning the ship from the aft control station, and might have rammed Graf Spee if he had had the speed to close. The last barrel of Exeter's last turret kept firing until 0730, when flooding cut power, silencing it too. 10 minutes later, Bell turned away, and Exeter, with 61 dead and 23 wounded, played no further role. Harwood's tenacity came at a price. Only 9,000 yards separated Graf Spee from Ajax and Achilles. A single hit from an 11-inch shell had already disabled both of Ajax's aft turrets. With Exeter finished and his cruisers running low on ammunition, Harwood made smoke and turned to open the range. When Graf Spee failed to press the advantage and continued west at high speed, Harwood came about to pursue. With the cruisers on his tail, Langsdorff received permission from Admiral Raeder to put into Montevideo, Uruguay's capital. He reached the roadstead shortly after midnight on the 14th. Ajax and Achilles patrolled the 120-mile-wide length of the River Plate estuary like sentinels, on guard for Graf Spee. To dog her to her doom should she venture forth, wrote Winston Churchill.
Montevideo Harbor for the battle-scarred Admiral Graf Spee. A fire control tower smashed, her planes wrecked, a hull splintered by shell fire, the battered 10,000-ton German pocket battleship prepares for a rendezvous with death. From topmast to waterline, from bridge to main battery, despite hasty repairs, she bears the marks of a hot 18-hour sea fight.
International law allowed 24 hours for repair and replenishment at a neutral port. By claiming the ship needed to be made seaworthy after suffering 70 hits, however, Langsdorff and the resident German diplomat negotiated a 72-hour stay. The resident British and French ministers made the obligatory protests, dryly noting that Graf Spee had made port by cruising 100 miles at high speed. Though most hits had caused superficial damage, the oil purification plant used to prepare diesel fuel for the engines, the desalinization plant, and the galley had all been wrecked. Graf Spee had also suffered almost 100 casualties, including 36 dead. Langsdorff had also fired off much of his ammunition. Unless he solved his serious fuel, water, food, and ammunition problems quickly, crossing the Atlantic and returning safely to Germany was unlikely. He would be lucky, the repair expert said, if the ship could depart in 2 weeks. The delay favored the Allies. HMS Cumberland, with 8 8-inch guns, arrived the first night. Next, an oiler arrived to refuel the light cruisers. Owing to clever work by British naval intelligence, rumors of powerful reinforcements converging on the area began to circulate. Phony signals and a whisper campaign had deliberately name-dropped battlecruiser Renown and aircraft carrier Ark Royal. In fact, none of the big ships then charging toward Uruguay to join Force G would arrive before the 19th. As Langsdorff weighed his prospects, Graf Spee's predicament had caused an international sensation. After failing to obtain an extension and being informed he must depart by 2200 hours on the 17th, his options amounted to a fight to the death with a far superior enemy, a possible upriver fight to reach Argentina for years of internment, or sparing his crew by scuttling the ship. Sacrificing his crew was out of the question, and Berlin left the decision on whether to scuttle or be interned with Langsdorff. On the afternoon of the 17th, he transferred more than 700 of his men to a German merchant ship. As crowds watched expectantly, Graf Spee weighed anchor and moved slowly downriver. 5 miles west-southwest of the harbor's entrance, the ship exploded, caught fire, and settled into shallow water. Langsdorff had wished to take the ship home in January. Now instead he decamped to a hotel in Buenos Aires, where 3 days later in full dress uniform and, as certain sources claim, draped in the ensign of Kaiser Wilhelm's navy, he shot himself. Langsdorff was buried locally with full military honors. The inglorious end to Graf Spee foretold the fate of the Third Reich's large surface ships. Raeder claimed Hitler never fully grasped the Royal Navy's superiority. Hitler blamed Langsdorff. The entire fiasco turned on his failure to destroy Exeter, the Führer claimed, while Raeder understood that avoiding such a fight altogether was crucial. He praised the late captain's fighting spirit, but admitted that his initial misidentification of Exeter proved decisive. The verdict of history has commended Langsdorff not only for the devotion shown to his crew, but also his humanity in removing and caring for the British sailors whose ships he had sunk. For the Royal Navy, the pursuit of the Graf Spee was an unqualified and inspirational victory. As a bonus, while hunting the Raeder, the British also netted 1 naval auxiliary and 8 German merchant ships. Harwood and his captains, indeed all veterans of the engagement, which was the first significant naval battle of the war, enjoyed celebrity status at home. The city of Exeter held the most memorable of the victory parades, with the cruiser's crew marching through town, holding their ship's tattered battle ensign high. Harwood received a knighthood, while both Bell and Ajax's captain Charles Woodhouse were given command of King George V-class battleships during the war. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video.